All
And
right, team. We got a great podcast guest today. Zach. Zach is a CrossFit level 4, had CrossFit gyms. And Zach, maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit. I know we were just talking before the camera, some of the things that you're doing now with CrossFit and just kind of what you've been doing. And we've been having a conversation of different methodologies, and I love it. It's a great conversation. But would you mind just introducing yourself to the audience for us today?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So I started training. Well, actually, I started training a lot longer. But I was going to say 2005, but I had been training before then.
Mhm.
I found CrossFit in 2005 when I was in the Navy, is what I should say. And that kind of put me on the trajectory to becoming a trainer and civilian gym owner when I got out in 2008. Obviously, I'd been training before that and had been physically adept, played a bunch of sports growing up, the high school weightlifting room and all that stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of people go through. But I started working for CrossFit, the company, in 2010 on seminar staff. And I've been teaching the level 1 and level 2 seminars since then. More recently, I was brought on as a business mentor for their pilot program to help new affiliate owners or new gym owners navigate the business ins and outs of owning and running a gym. And alongside that, since about 2019, after I left gym ownership, I've been working for a company called PushPress, which is a gym management software solution. And I am currently filling the role of director of strategic partnerships with them. So
you gotta like a long pedigree. Well, first off, thank you for your service. I appreciate it. What were you doing in the Navy? What were you doing in the Navy?
I was at SEAL Team 4. And
he shot Tiger Woods.
I told you that story, didn't I?
Yeah,
I forgot
that's a good story.
That's a cool. So yeah, for some reason, Tiger Woods had an invitation to come out and do some CQB stuff with us, some room clearing, and we're using simulations and stuff like that, and going through rooms and teaching him the flow, basically, like how to go in through doorways and communicate with the team. And we did some force on force, and I got to put a paint pellet, so to speak, 3 of them right up his body. It was great.
And then he took you down to the golf course and ripped you a new one.
Oh no! I didn't allow him to do anything that he was better at than me. So
good. I love that. That's so cool. And how long were you in the Navy for?
6 and a half years. Yeah,
that's cool. And then you bridged the gap because was the Navy. Why did you go from Navy to CrossFit? Was that something that you wanted to do in civilian life, or was that something you were attracted to? What was the attraction to CrossFit after Navy?
So obviously, like in the Navy, in that line of work, you have to be physically fit. And we had been using a few different methodologies to be operationally ready, to have the physical capacity to do our job well. And in about 2005, I met Dave Castro, along with some other well-known CrossFit trainers, and Dave was in the Navy with me and was my class proctor and introduced me to CrossFit as a training system. And it was just something that I realized made sense for the type of work that I was in. So I was like, this is better than just, running for miles on end and then doing a bunch of pull-ups and push-ups and then going to the gym every now and then and lifting a barbell and dumbbells. It was a more holistic approach. And when I got out, I had a knack for communicating the movements and the methodology, and it just kind of naturally fit as I started training people.
That's so cool. Yeah. That's so cool. Yeah, I remember myself getting into CrossFit 2007, 2008. I think there was a video. It was just Rich Froning talking on the screen. And it was like him in it looked like almost like a dark alley, like a dark warehouse. And it's like, be the jack of all trades or something like that. And it was just him speaking. He was doing some toes, clean, like toe to bars, cleans. And I was like, I love this. But the problem with it, and this is why I got into the field of like wanting to go to physical therapy. Now I've been like a, coach and trainer, was because the problem was, you have this young kid wanting to be like Rich Froning But realizing like he's also, I was wrestling in middle school to high school to college, realizing like you're taking two methodologies that are like, you're doing strength, you're doing CrossFit, but then you're also doing wrestling practice, right? Which is like you're both red barring. And if you don't have a proper program, that's where I got hurt a lot. And that's why, like, just kind of alluded in our previous conversation, I was like, man, I got to figure out like what's a good program for me. Not against anything against CrossFit, but like a good program for me that I can program so I can help for the performance. And I think we could talk more so about that, as we were talking about before, like how so in the CrossFit community, like how come CrossFit got a big stigma of like, oh, people got hurt there, like, or it gets a lot of that.
Yeah, it definitely gets a lot of that. But I mean, I'll give you my opinion. My opinion is that people focus on the wrong thing at the wrong time. When you're first starting out with any physical training program, and this is when we were talking about the CSCS and a lot of other, actually the vast majority of other training methodologies, is that there is less focus on how your body actually moves and more focus on what your body is actually doing, in the sense of, is it going fast? Is it lifting enough weight? Yada, yada, yada. And like, how old were you when you found it, or when you started that in that?
I was like
story.
I was like 2007. I was like 12. 12. I don't know, like 12 to 13.
I mean, so this is what I would say. It's like, you imagine, we all understand the anatomy and the physiology to a certain extent of a teenage male, right?
Yeah.
It would take a lot for you as a teenage male, if you are eating and sleeping decently, it would take a lot for you to overtrain, especially if you already came from like a relatively fit background, like wrestling. It would take a lot for you to do so much volume.
Yeah, that's where the problem was. So I followed CrossFit a lot, and I was watching like Rich Froning, Matt, all the Matt Lee, all these guys, and kind of got into it and was like, I heard them speak about things, but then there was other dietary things. So I was trying the paleo thing.
Yep.
I was like middle school to high school. And like, I kind of allowed myself to do that whole thing. That's where I feel like the problem was. I don't think it was CrossFit that was a problem, or the wrestling was the problem. Right. I think it was my diet. I think that because I don't know if I was overtrained or I was just under recovered, because I was doing the CrossFit thing, but I was doing paleo with it, realizing like, you're doing this crazy CrossFit stuff and then you're doing this crazy wrestling practice in season. It's like, I just never had enough. And then also you got to remember, like, I was cutting weight all the time. So
yeah, the dietary habits of a wrestler is probably not conducive to performance training with CrossFit. But hormonally and physiologically, if you had a normal diet, I doubt that it would be the volume, especially if you were sleeping enough, that would hinder you. If people get injured, I would say, yeah, it's definitely under recovery. Diet and sleep are going to contribute to that, but poor movement also compounds that. Meaning it's a higher stressor on your nervous system. It's a higher stressor on the mechanical tissues of your body. And that's where CrossFit, I think, differs itself. If you go to a good CrossFit gym, there is a difference between following CrossFit style workouts or just doing CrossFit style workouts and then following the methodology. Oh, my dog's whining. And so we just recently moved to Kansas. I don't know if you can hear the dogs that are whining. My dogs have never seen a squirrel in their life until about 3 weeks ago.
No way.
And we have this big bay window here now in Kansas, and the backyard is just filled with squirrels. So my dog, I don't know if you guys can see, he just stares out the window.
Oh my gosh.
And as soon as he sees a squirrel, Kilo.
What's the name? That's the name of the dog?
Kilo.
That's a cool dog.
That's it's funny hearing you guys attack this, and then like I see your face, Zach, and I know you want to say something because I know you so well. And then Seamus talking about this, and again, like, okay, like the methodology behind a paleo diet, right? I mean, it's going to be very anti-inflammatory at its core, right? Like that's kind of the idea behind the methodology. Yeah. But again, you cutting weight, you're simultaneously trying to push performance in these two barometers, right? Trying to like simultaneously gain strength and or a skill set or high volume movements. And yeah, you were definitely under recovered because you're in a deficit. Like it wasn't the paleo diet per se. It was just calorically you weren't meeting and fueling your needs because
exactly
you needed to weigh in at whatever 117 or whatever you were at wrestling wise.
Yeah, and the thing too, what I noticed about that too is like just movement mechanics definitely going to be faulty. I think that's where I got hurt more. I don't think it was the methodology. Like when you're just wrestling with someone, you fall a certain way, you're going to hurt your shoulder. That's how I hurt my first shoulder. Or like now that like you have this faulty shoulder, and then you go to do a bench like 2 years later, sometimes there might be still things that are messed up with you. So you don't necessarily go to that weight. You might have to move differently. And that's where I've realized like, it's not the methodology. It may not be the diet. It's like, you have to combine the right set for that person, that individual. And like, for me, it took me a long time to find what was appropriate in programming for myself, where I wasn't getting hurt, where I could still be on the mats because I do jiu-jitsu now, and then still be able to feel recovered, go to sleep, all these things. It took a long time,
Yeah, everybody's system is going to be different. What exercises and movements and methodology they subscribe to should support any system that they subscribe to, should support the goals. So yeah, if you have a goal of being a high level performer in wrestling, but you are stacking your wrestling training with the programming and workouts of a person that wants to perform high in CrossFit, at a high level in CrossFit, like CrossFit competition. Those might be conflicting goals, especially considering the caloric restriction of having to stay under a certain weight. So yeah, that would obviously and very drastically be counterproductive. I think the biggest issue today facing, and this stems from our conversation before we started the cameras rolling or the recording, is that I think people see CrossFit programming and they think that is where the methodology ends. It's a certain type of workout. And what they don't understand is that CrossFit has a very specific charter of movement mechanics and then building consistency with those mechanics and then adding intensity. The workout is only half the picture. The other half of the picture, because how long does an average CrossFit workout last?
You want like, well, an actual class is an hour, but you're working out maybe 20 minutes.
Exactly. Like a long CrossFit workout's 20 minutes. So people are like, well, what do you do for the other 40 minutes? And they don't realize it's like, well, you have a very solid 10 to 15 minute warm up, maybe even 20 minutes. The shorter the workout, the longer the warm up, because the shorter the workout, the harder you're going to go. So the more warm you need to be in order to go hard. And then you have all this other time still left over to practice and refine your movements under the eyes of a coach, and then do a cool down stretch and mobility stuff. So it's like people see the workout that they're going to go hard in, and they don't realize how much extra attention to detail surrounding that workout is necessary in order to actually live the program or execute the methodology.
And perform it at a high level. And I think too, like, so most of my clients are CrossFitters, Seamus, right? When it comes to nutrition coaching, there's a blend, but most of them are still CrossFitters. And it's most of them went to Zach's gym originally too, right? So it's like there's this difference of like, they know what great coaching looks like, they know what subpar coaching looks like, and they know what, like, what fits them right now and what's going on at their current gym. And with all that, it's interesting to know that the most effective programming on paper is sometimes not what gets people in the door, right? So there's this fine line of like enticing the people to come in. Like, all right, effective day of running programming, no one shows up. I'm gonna do this at home. Oh, that's my rest day. But when it comes to actually performing or getting the body composition they want and tapping into maybe an aerobic system, they actually fucking need that. But like, you see a 5x800 meter repeat. Fuck it. Thursday? All right, that's my normal rest day anyways, right? And so, but also too, a lot of the times people get so caught up in the competition of CrossFit because of the sport behind it, that they're like, well, why would I do this program, or why would I do this Isabel 30 snatches per time any differently today than I normally do it? I'm just go quick singles the whole way. And I would argue you're here for training. How long can you hold on to the bar? Can you do it in sets of 3 or 5 or 6, right? Challenge yourself in a different way to have a new stimulus and be like, oh, I didn't know my capabilities. So then when it comes to game time and you have to resort to quick single reps, you know that like, you know where your threshold is, right? And that's all about the coaching, and coaching matters a hell of a lot more.
That's the art of coaching, right? Like that's like 1,000%. The next level. I think, we were just talking about this, like with, we've had Brett. I remember starting to record like the boot camps that I used to coach, the semi-privates, the privates, and like they were on Zoom or they were recorded. And you can see like the difference when I started reviewing my game tape. I'm like, oh, I don't say it too many times, or I don't make that stupid analogy. I'm doing much better. I used to do a lot of tactical cues like touching and stuff like that. I remember one of my professors in a strength and conditioning class, he's like, I'm gonna tell you right now, don't touch people. If you're touching people, you may not necessarily be the best coach. And I'm like, all right, there's like a double-edged sword to that. But he told me something too, Marcos. It was the art of coaching as well. He was kind of like, in American culture, it might be okay to do like tactical cues, but he's like, I've actually been in gyms, and he's like from Brazil. I've been in gyms in Brazil where you touch a woman, her man will come and beat you. And I was like, oh, I didn't know this. I didn't know this. So, so there was always these different moments of teachability to me or coachability to me, where I was like, how can I get better? With COVID, I couldn't touch my clients. How can I make my cues better? Brace the ribs, tighten that lumbopelvic hip complex without touching them. And I think you're right, Marcos.
You gotta be careful.
Yeah, you gotta be careful. Yeah,
you gotta be careful touching that lumbopelvic hip region.
Yeah,
can't get too tactile around there.
Can't do that tactile. Yeah, no. And I just back to your point, Zach. Movement, not intensity. I saw a post from CrossFit the other day. I think it said something. It was like a 2-pager. It's like a slide carousel. It said something along the lines like, if you're not focusing on the movement, the technique, like you're doing CrossFit wrong. It was basically that. Yeah. Can you talk about the movements, the technique before the intensity, kind of like what parameters you like to see, like what movements you feel like are being just kind of messed up or not really being overlooked that you see often when you teach these?
Do you want me to talk? Do you want me to talk about specific movements, or do you want me to talk about the framework at which we view mechanics and then consistency and then intensity?
I'd say the frameworks, and then we can get into some specific movements, as example.
Because you could go to a coach or an athlete and just be like, hey, I need you to move with good mechanics. And then people would be like, okay, well, what does that mean? And that means that they're in the realm of human movement, of every think of all the movement that humans as a body, as an organism can perform. In the realm of human movement, there are some principles, guidelines by which you need to be able to move, you need to be able to exhibit in order for you to be efficient, in order for you to accomplish the goal that you want to accomplish, and in order for you to be, we'll say, orthopedically safe during the given movement. So efficiency would speak to, like, if I wanted to get up and turn on that light switch over there, what's the most efficient means of me doing that? Probably getting up and walking. What would be an inefficient example? Me getting up and trying to handstand walk over there would be inefficient, right? Even though I could probably be orthopedically safe, and I could probably be somewhat, I don't know. I don't think I'm actually that good at handstand walking. So that's a bad example, but Marcus is much better at handstand walking than me. But so it's like when you watch someone move with good, quote unquote, good mechanics, the movement is going to represent a broad spectrum of qualities that are going to allow those things: efficiency, safety, and being able to actually accomplish the task. So when it comes to a specific movement, cool. If you wanted to do a squat, can you do the squat and define what a squat is? It's not just bending your knees and your hips, because otherwise that could be a good morning. It could be a hinge, is bending the knees and squat. So we define a squat as getting your hips below your knees and then standing up all the way. Right? Mm-hmm. That's our definition. That's our standard of a squat. So can you do that while remaining orthopedically sound and being efficient? with your levers being your torso and your legs in this case. So once you can exhibit those good qualities, cool. You have the mechanics. Can you consistently do them even at a given level of fatigue? Like, or do I need to be, as your coach, do I need to be next to you the entire time, reminding you where to put your knees, where to put your feet, where to put your hips? If I have to constantly remind you, you don't have the understanding of the movement to do it consistently on your own.
Yeah. So or at that fatigue. Yeah.
Or at that fatigue. Exactly. And everybody has a certain level of fatigue. I mean, even you've been exercising for many, many years, if not decades, right? There's a certain level of fatigue that everybody has where their mechanics are going to break down, right?
Yeah.
But that's a different topic. Intensity is basically saying, okay, cool, you have the mechanics, you're consistent with those mechanics. Now let's ask you to go faster, do more reps, or perform the movement at a heavier load so that we can start to approach that fatigue level where you now have to manage your mechanics more closely. Because otherwise it's not challenging for you. You're not going to adapt. So that's CrossFit's view on moving well. That's our methodology. We have a name for it. It's called threshold training. And that's, I think, what's something that sets apart CrossFit methodology from a lot of the things that like the CSCS will teach. A lot of other programming methodologies will teach. The adaptation, the stimulus is built into the methodology.
That's what I would say is I definitely, when I took the CSCS and I took that, because when I got my degree in like exercise science, I was like, a lot of this stuff CrossFit already kind of like proved, or not even proved, like did better. And I was like, so like, I'm gonna go back and get my CrossFit. I'm gonna go to my CF1 or 2 or whatever. Yep. But I definitely like felt that because I was like, sometimes I was like, I learned a lot from, because a lot of my background more so like high school to college and learning more so with the strength and conditioning was from a guy named Phil DeRue. And his methods is called the Rue Strong methods. And CrossFit steals from this, but it's the conjugate. It's the conjugate method from Louis Simmons, rest in peace, Westside. But he calls his a condensed conjugate, right? And he brings in other approaches in there where it's like French contrast. You definitely use different principles of like nasal breathing. There's like so many concepts that he brought into it, but he calls it his condensed conjugate because with fighters. The thing with fighters is, I know CrossFit has a season and everything. We talk about seasons in a sec, but with a fighter, he could be 12 weeks out. But then let's just say, hey, another opportunity came out. Now he's 2 weeks out. So it's how do you always have different dimmer switches going on at the same time? It's like how I like to say, it's like, are you working on strength? Are you working on mobility? Are you working on tissue adaptation? But you can dim and move those right away. And I love what he said about it's like a condensed conjugate, because he's like, well, what if you do have that 2 weeks out, not 12 weeks out? Can you dim this up real fast, bring this down in the programming and understand programming so well that you can get your fighter safely to that? So, but I know CrossFit has its seasons and stuff like that too. I mean, can you speak upon that in terms of like the bringing those modalities, the movements, intensities into the seasons and how to program, well into a season? If it's a CrossFit athlete.
So, I mean, that's interesting because CrossFit, Marcos is going to know exactly how I want to approach this, because CrossFit technically does not have a season unless you are talking about competing in the sport of fitness, like as CrossFit. Like if you talk to me, I hate the sport of CrossFit. I shouldn't say that. That's too strong. The sport of CrossFit is not what CrossFit is built on. So when you talk about CrossFit, the methodology, it's a general physical preparedness program. It's GPP, and there is no off season, in season. So if you're using CrossFit to train fighters or in season or athletes that have a season, it's going to look different because it's a GPP program, and you need to balance that with their sport specific program. For the general population, CrossFit, if it's programmed and executed well, the normal variance that the program naturally provides is a built-in dimmer switch.
Perfect.
Like you were talking about.
Yeah.
It because there are so many different adaptations that we're looking to incur on the body: strength, flexibility, cardiorespiratory endurance, stamina, balance, coordination, all accuracy, all these things, right? We talk about the level 1 because we're constantly trying to get them all better, but we can't ever focus on all of them all at once. You'll go through periods of time where it's like, cool, I'm getting stronger and now I'm just maintaining my strength while I'm getting more stamina. Okay, now I'm working on agility and the strength work has been toned back. It's so if you're doing the program correctly as a general population athlete, let's say, the dimmers are constantly going up and down, like you said, in order to keep people healthy and balanced. Now, for a fighter that's 12 weeks to 2 weeks out, see, now that's a specialized.
It's very special. I'm using it as a very specialized example.
Yeah, and you need a specific type of coach for that. Hopefully one that understands the principles of balancing GPP and sport specific training, but your normal CrossFit coach, that's probably outside the scope of them. And they should be going to a fight coach for that, or a strength conditioning, that's one of the main differences between what the CSCS teaches when about training NCAA D1 athletes versus, and I'm not going to train a basketball player that plays at LSU the same way that I'm going to train my mom who wants to go to a CrossFit gym and just be, fit. The principles that I'm going to apply in their training could look very different. But yeah, CrossFit as it stands, I like that analogy that you used, the dimmer switch. That's going all the time if you're doing CrossFit correctly.
I love it. Yeah. I think I definitely need to review. Might even have to just go get my CL1, just kind of play with that.
You can do it online, dude, at the comfort of your home. And honestly, like in my experiences, I've done L1, L2. I'm too lazy to get my L3, so I had to redo my L1. I had to do it online, and literally the fact that like you have to like watch some of these videos and then also go through like that quote in-person version of it was a very unique thing, because I got to deal with it from both perspective of like most people probably don't do the online L1 and then a normal L1 as well, right? Like but the experience was, because I've been there, because I've seen Zach execute it. Literally, I did my L1 under Zach when it was at Max Effort back in the day. The online one, like, it gave me a new perspective, because every time you're in there, you're getting coached slightly differently. The methodology is the same, but the way that they're cueing you, they say something a little bit different. And I was like, oh, I walked away with a lot of value today, and it was amazing. And little things that I didn't focus on with my squat before, or little things that weren't an issue before became an issue. And the coach was like, yeah, your thoracic mobility looks like shit. And I was like, that's funny, because that used to be my best thing.
What happened?
And it was literally like grabbing a book or a broomstick and things in my house to like do that, which again, the carryover there of like, oh, well, maybe you could go practice this stuff at home with a client. And like, and I think I know Zach's stance of like, CrossFit, the methodology does not equal CrossFit, the sport, right?
It isn't. It's two totally different things. Yeah.
And I would, like, I don't like labels personally, but like I would consider myself a true defined CrossFitter, because I still go to a quote global gym and I focus on, we'll say, just like a normal double progression, but then I throw in elements of high intensity and functional movements done at high intensity and use it as a barometer to see whether or not my training is actually worth anything. I quickly learned that I have not been jumping enough, and I fucking need to work that back in. And it's like you self-assess with little baseline tests, and then you find like, does that matter? Do I need to be training that right now? Yes or no? And I think that's where the methodology is universal. It truly is.
Oh yeah.
Even if your goal again is primarily hypertrophy for a period of time, or you're going to dedicate, for me, it's been the last 2 years, more like muscle mass building and bodybuilding elements, but I don't want to lose the foundational functional fitness things, because I want to be able to go play a sport with my kid at any time and not be so bulky that I can't do that.
Yeah, 100%. No, I like what you said there, because it's universal. One of the biggest things I think with coaches, if coaches are listening to this, or even athletes listening to this, is universality. I know you said, hey, coaching that D1 athlete and then the grandma in the room. But if you had to, Zach, like, what are some basic like progressions and regressions that you've been able to kind of like go to? You can name an example of a crazy workout like a Fran or something like that. I don't know, but like, what are like, progressions, regressions. Like right now I'm wearing this shirt. It's a DVRT shirt, dynamic variable resistance. It's one of the shirts that I got a long time ago. Josh Henkin, Ultimate Sandbag, basically the guy that made sandbags really famous, had like a whole thing on progressions and regressions. But can you speak upon that? And maybe we can get in the conversation on that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The progressions and regressions are probably one of the most valuable things a coach can understand, right? And that's because you're never going to deal with an athlete who is going to be able, or I shouldn't say never. I try not to speak in absolutes. You'd be hard pressed to find an athlete to work with that you will never ever have to modify an exercise prescription for, especially general population people. But I would say the more complex a given movement, the more of a building block for proficiency, for technique you need. So anything like snatches or the Olympic lifts, snatch, clean, jerk, right? Or the compound movements that require biphasic action. So push press, or you got your box jumps, something like that. Those movements should have a regression. And every coach, you're going to find value in knowing regressions for those things. But you also want regressions when tissue tolerance isn't there. So anything that is simple enough, to allow an athlete to exert more intensity than they are ready for, like physiologically. For instance, sprints or sled sprints, or high repetition of a lightweight movement that they can do that they aren't ready for, that is going to break down so much muscle that they're at risk for giving themselves rhabdomyolysis, something like that. So regression is usually done in those situations by reduction in volume or speed or load, but you can also change the movement pattern to give a similar stimulus. Like instead of sprinting, you could do I call them iron mics, but those jumping split lunges or a sled push, and it'll have less muscular, less breakdown. But then I think the most common understanding of regression is when technical skill level is not high enough to perform the movement with good mechanics, quote unquote, good mechanics. So things like snatches, like I was talking about, a full snatch from the ground into an overhead squat, like a snatch that you see in the Olympics.
Snatch.
Like start people by building their overhead squat. You can't do that. Cool. Go with an air squat. Go with a single arm dumbbell squat. Go with an overhead squat to a box, a quarter position, and then increase depth over time. You have a lot of different options. But other than that, I would say just a high hang power snatch or a dumbbell snatch. Get someone to jump and land underneath an object, taking it from below the hip to above head in one movement. So it's basically looking at the range of motion of a given movement and reducing the variables that provide the most amount of difficulty while maintaining an appropriate level of challenge. For their skill level.
Have you looked at Landmine University guys stuff? Either of you?
Did you? Were you showing me that stuff, Marcos?
Yes, I did.
Some of that stuff.
I like that.
I was going through some of his stuff. His stuff is good.
Yeah, because he was talking about, like, if I have an athlete and they come in 4 weeks out from like their sport, but I know the value of generating power and speed, his regression is the landmine for like a landmine snatch and a landmine clean and jerk. And like, because you can get the coiling, you can get these certain explosive elements, and then I can tie it into if they want to progress to the more difficult lift in the future, then they can, which I thought was like super duh. Like, but now I want to like do a freaking phase where all I'm doing is landmine shit. So
I went through a lot of that stuff because like a lot of that stuff, the landmine stuff was really good. I was like following a lot of it, like the coiling, David Weck, all his coiling stuff, and I even looked at like functional patterns and all the rotational stuff. But like, for example, I do want to do power with my clients, but my clients are not CrossFit athletes. Like when I was working in gyms and doing group classes, I was like, well, we can still do power. We can do rotational power. So I'll do like a landmine clean to this shoulder, rotate, boom, and it's a punch, it's a snatch, but it's in that range of motion, right? It's a press, and they still got their power in. I think sometimes like I think there was a podcast, I think it was like the Strength Talk podcast, where like there was a guy arguing with someone. It's like, what's the importance of the snatch? And he's like, well, if it's just power, can't we just do other power movements? Like if it's not the movement that we're talking about, we're just talking about power. Well, you can use the landmine for power, you know. Like it was interesting.
But that's one of the things that I would completely disagree with. Power is such you can work power with any movement, like you said.
Yeah.
Right. It's not the movement that dictates where you're working, although power is relative to the movement that you're working. Can you create power and can you train power with an air squat? Absolutely, you can.
Mm-hmm.
You can do max reps in a 10-second interval, right? And then you can load it up with a weight vest or something like that if you need to increase it. Power is just a result of intensity, or it's equal to intensity, right? Can you pick a movement that you would not be able to do to, let's say, train power with? Is there a movement that you could not train power with?
I can't think of any right now.
Marcos, can you think of anything?
I feel like there's always a power element with anything. Rotation, transverse.
Is there some movement that you can't train power with the correct loading parameters and speed requirements? There's nothing. So it's like when people are like, "Oh, I'm training power," I'm like, that tells me nothing, because you can train power with anything. Now, if you want to train lower leg or lower body power, okay, that's more specific. That tells me what you need in line with, like, and what does an athlete need? They need hip power and they need full body power, right?
Yeah.
Mostly depends on the sport, right? But like, that's where when people are saying like, "Oh, I'm doing this power block training," and then in my mind I'm thinking, okay, so that means every single movement that you're performing in
what's
this,
the definition of power
training. Well, do you want the
physics answer?
Yeah. work over time, right?
No, it's so funny that you say that, Zach, because I was going through, like, when I was going through my degree, they were always like, "Oh, give us like a TUP program, like hypertrophy, strength, and then power program, like your general linear like program into like 12 weeks, like you do this." I'm like, but it doesn't make sense because you're working all these aspects. It's like, well, 1 month you're only doing hypertrophy. Well, why? We can work on aerobic plyos at a certain amount, right, to get the tissue ready for other things. That's still power, right? You said the amortization phase, the quick changes, and then you have the strength block, and then it's like, okay, because you did the strength block. I think someone said it like on an Instagram meme. He's like, "Oh wait, I don't have 2 times my squat yet, so that means I can't do plyometrics. Oh, I don't have 3 times my body weight on deadlift. I can't do box jumps." It was just such a funny meme because it's like, yeah, you can always work.
I remember seeing that meme.
Things.
Yeah,
it's like, it's something like that. It's like you can always work these.
I find it interesting,
you know,
because you separate strength and power as training blocks, contrast it with hypertrophy. Now, hypertrophy is a result, whereas power and strength is a demonstration, right? Like power and strength, like hypertrophy is an adaptation that the body exhibits after really any type of training if it's necessary, right?
Yeah.
Now you can change your training to maximize hypertrophy, but strength is something that I mean, it's completely relative, obviously, to the athlete that you're training, but strength is something that requires a certain loading parameter to achieve.
Yeah.
Whereas hypertrophy, you can get hypertrophy from almost anything if you do it enough. Yeah. Now, is it going to be maximal? It's just, I'd like to have another conversation with you guys about nutrition.
Please.
It plays into
Let's move on to that. Yeah, I feel like we're talking about programming and the theory behind it a lot, and like what you guys do. I think, again, I'm gonna review the CL1. I really appreciate that. But yeah, let's move on to nutrition for sure.
Marcos is gonna kill me with the nutrition stuff, though. He doesn't. Actually, I don't know. I'm not even sure if I've talked about this. The labeling of calories. Have we talked about this, dude? Why do we use calories?
That's an energy unit. It's such a weird thing. I don't know.
Are you talking about the relative error?
No. I'm talking about, why do we as humans?
Can you guys hear me? Speaking of, I don't know if my internet's bad.
You're a little bit behind, but we can hear you.
Yeah, it's clear. The audio is clear.
No, I hear what you're saying because like there was this guy, Dr. Brett something on YouTube, and he's talking about like, I mean, we've always known that calories are just a measurement of energy, but why do we label it upon food? I think that's a great conversation.
Yeah, I've asked I asked a couple people that are going through their exercise science.
Yeah, it's way behind.
Oh dang. Yeah, he's lagging bad.
Lagging bad. Let me mute you for a little bit, Marcos, and then when you come back, I think we'll be fine. Yeah, there you go.
Maybe if his video is off, would that help his audio catch up? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe just do audio, Marcos. No one needs to see your face. I'm just kidding. We just put this in the background for anyone listening, or we just edit this out. But yeah, continue like the whole calorie and the food thing, and
I'm just trying to figure it out. I'm just trying to find someone that can give me an answer. Why do we use calories as the unit? And my suspicion is because we haven't found a better way.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, kilocalories is a representation of heat expenditure, correct? Like that's like we measure a food's ability to give us calories by how long it takes to burn it, like with a flame. That's how we figure out.
Yeah, you put in a bomb, bomb telemetry. It's like it's the weirdest thing. I still don't understand it in myself, and I don't understand the paradigms behind it because it's like we're using a unit of energy, like a different concept to explain something. But it's like, what is a system? What other system is there? Because we've been using that for so long, and it just seems so kind of ingrained in the culture, whether that's CrossFit or like physique or just normal day to day. Hey, the nutrition packaging says like 2,000 calories based off a 2,000 calorie diet. You see that on the thing there. So I don't know. It's such a weird question. I don't know how to answer that.
Our bodies don't transfer energy from food into energy storage or mobilization or utilization by way of heat. We do it chemically. And that's why it never made sense. So if you tell me that 2,000 calories of carbohydrate has the same energy impact on the human system that 2,000 calories from protein has, I just don't believe it.
No, that definitely isn't. Yeah, there's definitely different biochemical processes.
Well, I mean, like in protein is definitely more thermogenic. So in the body and the systems and depositing in that muscle protein synthesis and the turnover, right? Like there's a lot to consider. And I feel like that's why it's so nuanced. But the only thing that we know how to actually do with food relative to our physics is move them into a bomb calorie, burn them, right? And figure out what's associated with that burning. So it might be a broken science, but it's all we got. So we can make...
That's the thing. It's all we got.
It's all we got, right? So, I mean, until somebody could tell us that, which 10, 20, 100 years from now, that ends up being a new standard, that's totally fine. But that's part of science, right? It's like we grow with the science. We're not saying that this is irrefutably the end all be all. It's just the best that we know at this time, right? Like, let's go back 200 years ago, 1800. What did they even have technologically? Do you think they envisioned that I'm talking to two people in different parts of the world on a screen?
They probably couldn't even fathom stuff like this. Yeah,
exactly. Right. Like, so it's just beyond our understanding at that point in time. And again, it's like, I think my biggest one is that the way you even cook stuff can change the caloric composition.
Yeah.
Ben Greenfield talked about how if you cook white rice with like whatever 3 grams of fucking coconut oil or whatever it was, it literally cuts the carbohydrate yield by like 50%. And I was like, how does that even make sense? But as a chemical process, yes.
Yeah, you talked about all these different. Yeah,
a teaspoon or a tablespoon of coconut oil when cooking your rice cuts the composition of carbs down by 50%. And then I was like, well, how much fat are you adding in there too?
Does it change the volume?
I don't know. I don't know if I believe it. You know what I mean? But that's supposedly what they registered.
Ben is on another level sometimes.
But that blows my mind. But it makes sense because heat is breaking down the chemical bonds or whatever, and you're adding in lipid. It makes sense. I don't know what actually chemically is happening there, but I'm not surprised by that. But that right there is a good point. Like there's so much that we don't know when it comes to the human body and our own interaction with nature, food being a huge part of nature, that here we are having, and now this is going down the path of conspiracy theories, like, or something
I like
that,
this
right?
path. Don't worry, Zach.
Well, I'm just saying, it's like there's so much that we don't know, that we're not willing to admit that we don't know, that we have companies less regulated making products that they're like, oh, this is completely safe. Oh, we made this drug in the span of 6 months. Everybody should take this. Like stuff like that. Not that I'm anti-vaccination or anything like that, but I am anti-vaccination when you've had 6 months to a year, less than 18 months to actually produce something, test and yada, yada, yada. Yeah. I mean, I'm not the most educated person on that, but it just seems weird that we aren't regulating that stuff more, or we are at least allowing the marketing of that stuff to be unregulated.
You're 100% right. I mean, this is the stuff that like reason I got into CrossFit was, and like the health culture and the stuff, because I mean, there's a lot of movies and documentaries and things, like YouTube at the time was just like, if you could go down a rabbit hole of like, sugar is this, fats are that, protein. Like there's always that rabbit hole, but there was always kind of like an agenda of like, why is it that certain things do get pushed? Why is it that certain things can be allowed and all that? And we should, you know, my favorite one was like a Morgan Spurlock's movies, like the Super Size Me 1 and 2. Like, you know, the chicken one I thought was actually more informative, because he actually did more investigative journalism instead of just attacking like McDonald's. He was attacking like companies that own chicken farms and all this. And it's like, who owns these things? Like, who owns the places that make our food? What kind of practices are they doing? What are they doing to the environment? And it's like, oh shit, I think we need to ask that question more.
Yeah. And not to put on my tinfoil hat, but I think it all kind of stems from subsidies, man. Like, you know, anything that turns into a subsidy, when it's getting government backing, it's like, well, now I have a sure thing, but now how do I meet the demand? If the demand went from like a small niche type of like thing into now having to supply it for the whole country.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's just like, well, I mean, any way to get the competitive edge is no different than steroids, right? Why would people consider doing that? Oh, well, I need to be able to handle more volume so I can get to this thing faster.
Yep.
Right. And at the end of the day, let's be real. Like, everything boils down to like the bottom line. How am I making money? Right.
Yep.
I think, you know, and I
the
think
trade-offs.
And the trade-offs.
Life's a bunch of trade-offs, man.
Yep.
Yeah. And so, I mean, if you think of it that way, I mean, obviously, like, all of us here focus on marketing to a degree and psychology related behind a particular product, right? I even more so now going into my 30s, I'm like, it's odd, right? Like, where do you see the most advertising? People that have the most money. Why do they need to do that? Because they need to continue to make more money.
Right.
Whereas the people that might be a little bit more set in living, you know, go back to like our biohacker people, they become so obsessed with optimizing their life with all means of technology, but inevitably the thing that they eventually get to is like solitude, solidarity, being in the mountains, no Wi-Fi, no nothing, right? Like being self-sustained, right? Like that's like they're like, oh my god, like that video you sent me, Zach, yesterday, that meme. He's like, let me show you my. He's like,
the Huberman one? Oh, that was so good. I wake up at 4:55. I look at the sun for 45 minutes. I forget. Like, hey, just a side note with Huberman. Like, I'm being real with you. Like, I think there comes a point when you coach a lot of people and they just keep talking about Huberman, and you're just like, God damn! Like, it's like, go do things on your own. Like, he has a repertoire of like information and guests that he can get to, and it's like, dude, like, not everything is doable and realistic for you. You got to try these things on your own, because I've done the morning rituals and I've done all these things, and you realize, like, you know what the best morning ritual is probably waking up, sprinkling your face, maybe just a little journaling, and just get to your day, you know, like, instead of like an hour-long thing, because I've done that. And Huberman too, like, in person, I'll just be honest, love you, Huberman, but you're really boring in person. I went to
but he's an academic, dude. He's not meant to be the sales. He's not a Liver King. He's not going to entertain you with some,
I want to be entertained, Marcos. Quote. Put Liver King up here. I
mean, I think Huberman just does. I mean, he's entertaining to some extent when he's on his show. But the thing is, I'm not sure, because I haven't listened to him extensively. And I think I brought this up with you, Marcos, is like, I'm still not sure he vets these studies. He reads the studies, he looks at the abstracts, and he looks at the conclusions, and he goes through a lot of the science that he talks about, I think, at a high level. And then he's like, oh, if these findings are good, or these findings are something that I think people would find interesting, then he starts talking about it and be like, okay, this is why I think it's valuable for my listeners. But he doesn't actually look at the experiments, because I think if he did, he'd realize how invalid and repeatable a lot of those results in scientific studies are. He cites a lot of scientific information that is like, yeah, cool, that scientific study found this, but it's actually not a valid study. I don't know.
Yeah. Look at the amyloid plaque issue that happened with Alzheimer's.
What happened?
Wow,
Did you see that?
No.
All the study was invalidated. It was all fraudulent.
Oh, are you talking about that pharmaceutical company?
The one that, I mean, this is related to, God, what's his name? Max Lugavere's. Max Lugavere talked about how this study came out on a bunch of podcasts recently that refuted, or all the data that was in that beta amyloid plaque or whatever it was, that was like supposedly what was causing Alzheimer's in people, was all fraudulent data. It was all, like made up essentially. Now they're like, this is a byproduct of potentially having the disorder or type 3 diabetes or whatever that might actually be, right? But it was not actually the culprit. It was more of a byproduct, right? So they were trying to create drugs that would help reduce or eliminate these things, but it had no bearing on actually helping it out, to my understanding. Again, like, I didn't read the review, but same thing, like what Huberman does, and
Georgetown University Medical
so
Center.
So what Huberman does, in my eyes, is this is what we literally just said. Here's the science as we know it. Here's my understanding of it. You may or may not get positive value out of this thing, right? Maybe you'll give it a try. But like you just said, sometimes if you go down the rabbit hole deep enough, you're like, I don't even know where to start. He said I got to get outside and look at the sun for 45 minutes, and I got to spend time outdoors, and I got to do this, and I shouldn't have caffeine within an hour of waking. And I'm like, well, I work out 30 minutes after waking up, so I'm taking my fucking caffeine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's all individualized, right?
If it's gonna negatively
Marcos,
impact me, and
you're like in and out, brother.
I want to be fucking good.
Oh, yeah, we're losing him.
Yeah, we're losing you, Marcos. We're losing you a little bit. Apologies, man.
You know what I mean? Like, understand that there's certain
we're still losing.
You cannot.
Marcos is like probably going on the.
I don't think he can hear us.
Yeah, Marcos, I'm gonna pause you just for a second. Apologies, man. Like, I think Marcos could be going on the biggest riff, guys, and like probably like answer the answer right now and all that, but just the freaking internet's like not giving him the time of day. So Marcos, we do apologize. We'll probably
the connection does not want us to hear his genius.
Yeah, he had his most genius moment on screen, was not caught. Sorry. Damn, but no, you're right. Zach, I appreciate the conversation there, and I think like it's a lot of this. It's weird because I was listening to like the big heads again, like Lane and all that stuff, and I think maybe science is it. Lane Norton. He's I think things are getting better. I mean, if you look at food, like there's always that 20% rule that the FDA allows for like food to be off with calories, and I think people are becoming a little bit more. I guess like with social media and stuff like that, I think people are becoming a little bit more cognizant of like, hey, like this might be a crappy product. You know what I'm saying? Even because you were talking about marketing, right? Because where's the real like label about food? It's not on the front. The front is colors. It could say whatever it wants. It could say a whole food. What does that even really mean, right? And then, but the real stuff is in the back, and people don't see that. And I think when you're nuancing it. Like, we're 3 performance athletes kind of here, or people that are coaches. We're cognizant of this stuff, but the people that are not cognizant of this stuff, busy mom, I always think of my mom, 4 boys, single mom of 4 boys, going into the market, and it's like 4 boys tugging her by the shirt sleeve, going like, "Mom, I want this, and it's like, it says healthy, okay, cool, but it's not healthy. It's veggie chips, like what, what I mean, quote unquote. So I think there really has to be more. I don't know where the pushback would be, though. You know what I'm saying? I don't know where the pushback would be. Like, the pushback to say, like, these things are healthy. Like, who's going to tell these companies, like, hey, because it has one ingredient of a vegetable in there, you're allowed to say it's healthy, but then it's like,
yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you can't. I've actually spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I'm sure Marcos has it as well. It's like, you can't rely on regulation of the companies because there's too much to regulate. What you have to rely on is you have to fight fire with fire. The companies have become more intelligent, and they are out marketing the knowledge level of the average consumer. So what needs to happen is you can't regulate the companies to market differently. We have to educate consumers better. What needs to change is the way that consumers get information about what healthy food is and how to identify it, and then how to leverage that knowledge into a better lifestyle. So I think it comes down to less regulation. I think it comes down to less about regulation of the companies. I think companies need to be honest. I think they need to have integrity and actually put what's on the label. It should be what's actually in the box, or what the food is. I think truth needs to be upheld. But I think what needs to happen is your average consumer needs to become more intelligent about food. Think about it 50 years ago. Like, or 100 years ago, people didn't have to know what we know now, because they didn't have to deal with 90% of the products that are out. Like, if you went to the grocery store 80, 70 years ago, 50 years ago, and looked at the ingredient lists in corn puffs, it was 4 ingredients or 5 ingredients maybe. Now it's like 27. So that's what needs to change, is people's understanding of what food is and how to identify it.
Yeah. What is go ahead, Marcos.
I think I'm finally back. Sorry about that.
Yeah. That's way better, dude. Yeah.
I know. My riff was just saying that with Huberman, the science essentially is him explaining it based on what's current, like we were saying earlier. That's it, right? And then it's going to change. And we need to find less time on that. But like you just said, with becoming an educated consumer, again, maybe you only limit it to 5 ingredients that you actually eat in a bar or a product. Like, have little goals for yourself, because you don't know what, I mean, shoot.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, but like, we had a meeting with our health coaches at Cenogenics, and one of them was listing all the ingredients, and some of them were just like vitamins and minerals, right? They have like really long, extensive names. You're like, I don't know what the fuck this is. And you're like, oh, it's vitamin B, But I think realistically, you just have to just double check it. Take a peek at the label if you're baiting something processed, and try to avoid it best to your ability. 80 to 90% of the time.
I think the vast majority of people should just, and this is a culture and a cultural and social issue. They need to just stick to eating less processed, less refined foods. Like, the longer the ingredient label, probably the worse it is for you, right? Like, you can say in general, right? So I see far more people eating foods that come in boxes or packages than eating foods that could expire by the end of the week.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's hard to go wrong if you're eating mainly meat, fruits, and vegetables. If that is 80% of your diet, it'd be hard to jack yourself up.
Yeah. Yeah. I honestly agree. I think like
being pre-planned is difficult, though.
Yeah. Or here's the thing. It's not about pre-planning. It's about seeking like really good taste. Like it's about seeking flavor. I don't pre-plan my meals at all. I don't, but I can guarantee you
pre-plan
that
you pre-plan your shops.
Not really.
Yes or no? Yeah. You have like you have
pre-plan my shops.
You eat habitually.
Oh yeah, I eat the same thing. I eat the same thing almost every day if I can help it.
Yeah, but when you started that, it took you time to build that habitual instinct of like, hey, like I probably should only buy 5 apples because I'm going to go back to the store on day 6 to get 5 more. Right?
Yeah, but everybody has to go through that process regardless of what they're buying.
True, but most people are working 2-3 jobs, driving from place to place. They don't work remotely like we do, and it's a harder ask. You know? I mean, I'm not making excuses for people, but that's
what I was going to say.
Likely,
that's what I was going to say. I was going to touch upon this. Was like, man, it's when you get in the trenches of like coaching people, and this is just for the audience. I know we all coach people here, but like you start seeing the psychology of the decisions that they make, and it's like going back to like the mom with the 4 kids. My mom, it's like yeah, they know that they need to probably get the more whole foods and stuff like that. But it's just so much easier to say yes to the child that's nagging at them, you know, or it's like easier to kind of understand like, okay, maybe I need to cook this. And it's like, that's even more of a stress after coming from a long day. What's an easy hamburger helper thing to do? You know what I'm saying? And the hamburger helper might be a little bit easier to work with. There's so much there that convenience, like these box foods and these like other things, like there's a reason why they're still around, you know. There's a reason why. There you are.
I don't know why, but my computer literally just shut off. Did
you plug it in? Did you plug it in?
It's still at 24%.
Hey, you know what? Sometimes things do that. That's weird. No, but I was what I was saying.
It's a tech issue episode.
Yeah, it's all good. I think we're dropping bombs on this one, guys. By the way, but like, no, what I was just trying to say is like, I think, like, I love what you're saying. Like, people do know what they're doing, Zach. Like, probably know what they need to do, right? Like, really watch the labels and stuff. But I guess it comes down to that individual where it's like they may not feel empowered by their life circumstances, Marcos was saying, because I've coached clients before where I've literally told them, like, you know, eating healthier per se is not necessarily as expensive if you tally it up the right way, you know. And they're like, oh, you know, I don't know how to eat healthy because it's just expensive, or I don't know how to eat healthy because I don't know how to cook. And that's like why they still stick with the box stuff or the convenient stuff, because sometimes they don't feel empowered to cook. And I was like making the hamburger helper analogy and like other things, and it's just like convenience. It's unfortunately, but like convenience and instant gratification are just, it sells real good in the food market.
Well, it's convenience for, like I said, for flavor. Why do people like hamburger helper? Yeah, it's convenient, but because it tastes something closer to what a chef would make than what they can make themselves. Nobody wants to eat a dinner of just grilled chicken with salt, pepper, and broccoli with butter and salt and pepper, which is something that I could eat every single day. I don't need to add. Yeah. But I don't meal prep it. How long does it take me to make that dinner? 12 minutes, 15 minutes max. And it's the same amount of time that it would take someone to make hamburger helper, but they just don't want the plain food. I remember I was talking to someone, I was like, oh, you want a snack? Here, have eat a couple carrot sticks, like full on carrots, and have it with put it in some sunflower butter or some peanut butter if that's what you need, and that'll be your snack, as opposed to the Snickers. And the person was like, no, I need real food. I'm like, how much more real could that be? Like, what do you mean you need real food? No, I need like a meal. I need something. I want like a quesadilla or something, is what the answer was. And I'm like, what the shit? I'm like, yeah. So, I mean, I understand it's meals that require protein, fat, and carbs with either a high sugar content or a high fat content and salt content. People crave that stuff. I think neurologically you get addicted to flavor.
Yeah, I was listening again. I was just going to reframe, but I was listening to Lane Norton. Like, again, he was just kind of, we understand I think we've understood metabolism for like the last 30 years. Like, we understand that someone obese can probably have the same metabolism or even a better metabolism than someone quote unquote already fit. because they weigh more. We understand that even if we calorically restrict someone, we're not going to damage their metabolism because they only go down by like a 30%. So, if you're really big, just run it down, get lean. Obviously keep your protein up. But what these people are realizing, it's like people don't just eat for fuel, right? We don't just eat for fuel. We eat for social gatherings. We eat for pleasure. We eat for, I don't know, sometimes we just feel bored. So we just want to get ourselves hedonics. Yep. And it really comes down to, sometimes it really is appetite. So what is the difference between a fit person and an obese person is appetite. They get more pleasure from certain foods. Like you said, get the goddamn quesadilla. Why? Because it's more pleasurable than the carrot and the peanut butter. Sorry, but it is.
Right.
And people will make that choice in this day to day. That I think right there is the fight. It's not the food. I think the fight is the choice, to teach people how to make a better choice.
Yeah, and building willpower takes time. And I think removing and stripping down, and I mean, almost doing like a whole 30 for a number of days, right? Even if it's not 30 days, but like learning textures. And we've talked to a lot of like food experts at this point where they're talking about like textural decisions. Treat yourself like your 5-year-old. Go back, lick, bite, taste, do things. Oh, I don't like this food. Try 100 of them in 1 week. You know what I mean? And just like little servings so that you have some reference as to like, I don't like this. I didn't know I like this. And, yeah, I mean, dieting's tough, man. I mean, I'm having a hard time with it right now because I'm trying to balance performance with it.
Yeah, I don't think, I've never looked at dieting as something that's tough. Not for me personally, but just in general. That's like someone saying,
you have kids, bro.
Well, yeah, and I am right there with you in the sense that like I have a very in my mind, like I know what I'm gonna do as a parent. I'm just not gonna have this stuff in the house, and I know that stuff is going to change. I've talked to you about this. I'm like, the kid will starve. He'll figure it out. He'll learn to eat, or she, or whatever. Right?
He'll starve.
to a certain
no child's
to a certain
starve, right?
No, but to a certain degree, there'll be limitations, but then the fact that it's there at times, it's just a little. It's where the willpower or the stress in the relationship, and this is what happens to me. Nighttime bath routine causes stress to both me and Brittany. Guess what then happens? I'm rummaging through the pantry for something to like cool me off, even though I know I don't need it. And I'm like, what the I'm literally my clients that I was talking to 10 years ago. What the fuck is going on?
Oh, you mean you're looking for food as a dopamine response?
Yeah, just something to like make my mood happier. And I'm like,
yeah.
And it's not that there's anything bad. It's not like we choose healthy snacks, right? Like, but the next thing you know, you mow down all the pretzels, little pretzel crisps, and you're like, okay, well, duh. And it's finding little displacement activities or finding little displacement foods I found that really helps me. And shoot, did you know that like freezing fruit and then trying to eat it when you're like in that mood is actually something that could be really pleasurable and kind of like slows you down, and you're like, oh, like it's like a literally if you freeze a cup full of berries, right? Like, or grapes,
dude, that's like my favorite.
It's going to be a far better option. It's still something sweet. It's occupying time. And by the time you get through this little like surge of like, I need a dopamine hit, it's over. And I did that last night. I was like, oh fuck, why haven't I been doing this? And it's like, duh, like
that's a good little hack.
You're forgetting.
I love the berries hack.
Yeah. And I'm forgetting. I was like, oh man, I'm looking forward to doing that again tonight. Cause I'm like, half the battle is just being consistent,
So, but that's what I'm talking about right there. You're already looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to something that I can use if that moment comes. I'm trying to stay better about like, I know I don't need as much. I'm not doing it. Literally today, I'm doing nothing demanding.
I feel like
tell yourself,
we as animals are wired to seek out food, and food has become so abundant for us that we now like if you're looking forward to a meal, as opposed to eating because, oh, I'm hungry right now. Like if I'm looking forward to a meal, it's typically because I know it's not going to be good for me.
It's gonna give pleasure for sure. It will give pleasure, maybe.
I think
what meal do you look forward to, Marcos, that except maybe like breakfast, because I love breakfast food and I know it's gonna be healthy. I just love waking up and eating breakfast. But it's like, what meal, like Thanksgiving, Christmas, my birthday cake. Like nobody thinks of a meal that they're like, oh, I can't wait to eat this, and it's actually a healthy meal. Socially, we look forward to things.
Yeah, I genuinely like you just said, breakfast. Like I would eat that meal 3 times a day, but then my mind goes like, am I missing micronutrients? Am I missing some shit here?
Well,
And I
you're
like get in my
weird,
own head.
so
Yeah, but like
Yeah, we're not
I
the
mean,
rest of the country, Marco. It's like we're,
I know,
you know.
6 to 8 ounces of steak with 4 eggs, and like again, if I feel like I need it, maybe 2 slices of sourdough toast. Like I could eat that 4 meals a day. But then you know what it is that when you have a wife, you know, dinner is like, what are we having? It's different and like gonna be pleasurable to my palate. And she can eat 2 bites and like I'm good. And then I'm over here like I cooked way too much. I don't want there to be waste. So I'm learning to refine that. It's a, you know, and it's a chef thing, you know, and it's difficult because like I'm like,
I
dude, I'm
wanted to
cooking
talk about
dinner
that,
every day
Marcos.
night.
I want to talk about
Well,
that. I know we're talking about food, but because we talk about like recipes a lot and stuff like that. I
Yeah.
really feel like there might be, and this is going back to that convenience too. I think the one skill that may be contributing to obesity is the fact that people don't have the skill of like cooking or knowing what they're putting in their body. Like,
dude, there's
they're
no
just,
home ec classes anymore. There's nothing
there's
that
none
actually
of
teaches
that.
you how to be a responsible adult in school, and you're just it's an issue, and that's why I made Zach serve on our board for the freaking nonprofit. Is like there's
obesity
elements
rates have gone up since home ec has stopped being taught in schools.
because you're dependent on the corporations.
Yes,
And the
you're
more
dependent
dependent you
on
want other
pre-made
people,
food.
the more you then have. I think I get it from both angles. You have to be a more contributing member to society and go to work. But like, guess what saves you money? Learning how to cook. So let's stop. I mean, not saying that that's the end
Not
goal.
only does it
but
save you money, it just makes you a healthier human. I don't. It's hard for me to believe that the government wants us completely debilitated, because I know they want us dependent on certain things, and definitely corporations do. But it's going to get to the point to where our population is so sick, and this probably won't happen in our lifetime, that we're going to stop growing, we're going to stop being productive, and we're going to regress, and the civilization is going to collapse in on itself because we won't be able to live in the environment. I feel like we are weaker physically and physiologically than the humans were 100 years ago.
Oh, 100%. I mean,
Yeah.
Ben, we were talking about Ben Greenfield before, but like I do certain things that he says. He's like, one of the things he says is like, just temperature. Like, go outside and not wear a sweater once in a
Right.
while. Like,
Yeah.
even if it's
Expose
cold, like
yourself to, yeah.
like little things like that, where it's like little things that I wasn't thinking about. Like, he's like, when's the last time that like you kind of like were in the weather and it's like, yeah, it hurt, but just can you stick with it? Like, or hey, like something was off a little bit, but can you stick with that? And it's like, I think it's very difficult for us as humans today to be, I'll just say it, but like I think comfort or discomfort is something that we just are completely avoiding as a whole society.
And that's why everybody should do CrossFit. Just kidding.
There you go. There you go.
Well,
CrossFit's uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And guys, I think this has been great. We'll have to do a part 2, but I do have another thing I have to, get over to as well today. And is there any like closing thoughts that, I mean, honestly, I feel like if we drop it right here and do a part 2, because I think that like we were kind of tapping into something, and I need to get a wired connection for fucking Wi-Fi and wired connection for LAM.
We can totally do a part 2. This was fun. We were just free flowing. It was good.
But I think we go back and after we do the show notes for this, come back with a little bit more targeted things, especially because now we've touched on a kind of a wide array of things. We kind of cast a wide net, and but yeah, Seamus, want to go ahead and do the outro for us, and then we'll come back and do part 2.
Yeah, we'll do. Guys, thanks so much for being here today, Mac Perspective peeps. We had a great conversation with Zach. Zach, again, thanks so much. I think we can tap into this more. I think this conversation needs to be fleshed out more. I think it goes even deeper into the conversation of really what's going on in our society with fitness, food, and just the comfort crisis that we're having. And but yeah, give us a comment, share, like, and if you guys want to hear more or have specific questions for the part 2, please put it in the comments below, and I would love to see it. Other than that, guys, thanks so much.
Awesome.
Nice.